Next, we're gonna learn about the properties and also the events occurring in the chemical synapse. But before that, let's learn about the different types of synapse. Essentially, there are two types of synapse, which is first the electrical and second is the chemical. Now, the electrical synapse is quite special in which there is direct transmission of electrical impulse through a special structure known as the gap junction. Think about the gap junction as the tunnel that connects between the two neurons, okay? Or you can think about it like a bridge, like the Penang Bridge, connecting the mainland of Penang to the Penang Island. And it allows direct transmission of the electrical impulse. So electrical impulse here referring to the action potential, which actually can directly travel through the gap junction. Because it doesn't involve neurotransmitter and because there is this structure that connects the two, you can imagine that the information or the electrical impulse can actually go both ways. It can cause bidirectional path. And where is this electrical synapse is found? It is mainly found in the cardiac muscle and the smooth muscle. Okay, because you can imagine that with this type of synapse, it can actually allows faster transmission of information. Therefore, it can produce a very rapid and also coordinated action in these muscles. If you think about the cardiac muscles, okay, think about the ventricular myocytes, the cells in the ventricles, in which it needs to pump out the blood so that the blood can be ejected to the whole part, the other parts of the body. Now, if to do this, the whole part of the ventricular need to contract at the same time. It needs to be rapid and it needs to be coordinated. Therefore, electrical synapse is very crucial in this tissue. Similar to smooth muscle, if you think about your intestine, it needs to contract to push the food forward, the bolus of food forward. Therefore, it also needs that rapid and coordinated contraction of muscle, which needs a rapid and coordinated transmission of information to that part of the intestine. And because it does not really need other chemicals, it is less susceptible to fatigue. Because as long as the gap junction is there, then the information can be transmitted all right. Now, how about the other types of the synapse, which is the chemical synapse? Now, chemical synapse, it is an indirect transmission of the information because it needs to be converted first via the neurotransmitter. It needs to be transported via the neurotransmitter. And because the neurotransmitter is only found at the synaptic end bulb, and it needs to travel and binds to the receptor on the postsynaptic neuron, it only allows one direction of information. The information in the postsynaptic neuron can never go upwards or backwards to the presynaptic neuron. And unlike the electrical synapse, this type of synapse is found in many tissues apart from the cardiac and the smooth muscles. But because it needs the conversion of the electrical impulse into the chemical neurotransmitter and then to form another electrical impulse in the postsynaptic neuron, it is slower in action. There is this gap in between the arrival of the information in the presynaptic neuron to the generation of the actual potential in the postsynaptic neuron, which is known as the synaptic delay. So how long is the delay? It is about half of a millisecond. And because it needs a neurotransmitter, this neurotransmitter, it can be recycled, it can be degraded, it needs to be resynthesized, because at some point when the neurotransmitter is depleted, then this chemical synapse is vulnerable to fatigue, especially with repeated stimulation when the neurotransmitters are depleted. Now let's have a look at the events that happens during the chemical synapse. So there are essentially 8 steps altogether. Let's go one by one. The first one is the arrival of action potential in the presynaptic neuron. So when the action potential arrives in the presynaptic neuron, what happens to the synaptic end bulb? There will be depolarization of the synaptic end bulb. With the depolarization occurring here, it will then stimulate the opening of a special channel known as the voltage-gated calcium channel. Voltage-gated calcium channel will open. As the name suggested, this protein channel only open upon stimulation of the voltage, which is the membrane potential of this synaptic end bulb. And it is a calcium channel, therefore it allows for the calcium to flow into the cell. You will learn afterwards that in the next lecture of body fluid that the calcium is higher in the extracellular fluid, meaning in the fluid outside the cell rather than inside the cell. Therefore, when this calcium channel open, this calcium will then move into the cell. And what happens when it moves into the cell? There will be increase in the intracellular calcium concentration. When this occurs, the synaptic vesicles containing the neurotransmitter will then move and fuse with the membrane, with the cell membrane, and then it will release the neurotransmitter into the synaptic cleft by the process known as the exocytosis. This neurotransmitter will then travel across the synaptic cleft, and then it will then bind to the receptors on the postsynaptic membrane. Now, depending on the type of the receptor and also the type of neurotransmitter, there will be membrane potential changes in the postsynaptic membrane. Okay, potential changes in the postsynaptic membrane. If it depolarizes, meaning that it becomes less negative, then it may fire an action potential. If it hyperpolarizes, then there will be no action potential.